Map of Wellington notes the original Māori place names in the Wellington area. The red box covers Te Aro and Pukeahu Mount Cook areas. Pukeahu Mount Cook is where the Carillon is located and where we are now. Here's a closer view. Pukeahu Mount Cook, shown by the orange arrow, has long been used by Māori as a pā and for cultivation, with folk residing at Te Aro Pā at the waterfront, where the green arrow is shown. Pukeahu is an old name, and there's no record of why the hill became called this. In Te Reo Māori, Puke means hill, and ahu is to heap up, so a possible meaning is raised hill. Alternatively, ahu may derive from the kupu tuahu, which can refer to an altar or a stone platform, or the central stone of a marae. So Pukeahu, which is sometimes spelled as Pukeahu, two words, may suggest the idea of a sacred hill or a place to perform rituals. The New Zealand Company surveyor, Captain William Mine Smith, also recognised the strategic position of Pukeahu Mount Cook. By late 1840, an army post and a prison were situated on Pukeahu Mount Cook, even though the land was still a native reserve. In 1842, there were reports of 60 prisoners being held there, although the building was, and I quote, a wretched building, large enough for 12 or 15 human beings at the most. In this image, the green arrow indicates Te Aro Pā, the orange arrow shows Pukeahu Mount Cook, and the red arrow indicates the future location of the Carillon Tower. This 1852 painting shows two Māori figures standing on the road between the harbour and Pukeahu Mount Cook. The flax bushes at the side of the road show the swampy nature of the Te Aro Flats before the 1855 earthquake that lifted and drained the land. Imagine it's 1858 and we're up on the cliffs above Lambton Quay, looking back southeast to Pukeahu Mount Cook. The orange arrow shows the flattened top of Pukeahu Mount Cook, with the buildings and barracks of the 65th Army Regiment upon it. The pink line indicates the future location of Buckle Street, where there is a row of troops' houses at the base of the hill. The red arrow indicates the approximate location of the future Carillon. After this, in 1870, the barracks were used as prison, most notably, or infamously, for the men from Parihaka who had resisted compulsory government acquisition of their land in 1879 and were then arrested. In 1882, a new prison was announced for the site, and plans were prepared for a vast 6-wing brick structure. The hill was reduced a further 10 metres in height to create a larger flat area, and work began soon after with the bricks made on site by the prisoners. The green arrow shows the first wing of the prison. The red arrow, future site of the Carillon. The pink dashed line is Buckle Street. And there the blue arrow is Mount Cook Police Station, which is across the road still today. This is an extract of the Thomas Ward map of this area. Thomas Ward was a prominent Wellington surveyor and civil engineer who came to New Zealand from the UK in 1873. Ward is best known in Wellington for his work as a surveyor, particularly for the creation of this detailed map of Wellington City that was produced in 1889 to 1892. This map shows the proposed prison. Most of it is dashed, but the southern wing, where the cyan arrow is pointing, is solid, and that is the completed wing. The blue arrow shows the future Mount Cook Police Station, and the pink dashed line, Buckle Street, red arrow for the Carillon. As an aside, if you're interested, the Thomas Ward maps are viewable online at the WCC archives. In 1900, with only one wing and 2 basements of the prison completed, work was halted because of public opposition to a large prison in such a close and prominent location to the city. Instead, it was used by the army and became known as the Alexander Barracks. The left interior photo is from 1927, and the right shows the Alexander Barracks in 1929 after army use had ceased. In 1931, it was demolished to make way for the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum building and the National War Memorial Carillon. Overall, since European settlement began in earnest in 1840s, Pukeahu Mount Cook has been heavily modified, leaving little of the pre-colonial landscape intact. Consecutive construction projects have flattened off the cone-shaped hilltop, lowering it by around 30 metres, so any remnants of Māori use and occupation are likely to have long since disappeared. In 1919, the government created the National War Memorial Committee and allocated £100,000 for a National War Memorial in Wellington. Prime Minister William Massey said that any memorial should be visible from any part of the city and from ships entering the harbour. There was much debate about what form the memorial should take. These images show some of the options that have been chosen in other locations around New Zealand. The government eventually agreed to build a complex that included a National Art Gallery, a museum, and a war memorial right here in Pukeahu Mount Cook. Independently of the government process, local people formed the Wellington War Memorial Carillon Society in 1926 to raise money for bells for a carillon. In 1927, they placed an order to cast 49 bells for the proposed First World War memorial. The confidence with which the society took this step was actually rather remarkable. They had neither a campanile, bell tower, in which to hang the bells, nor the money, nor the land to build one. At this point, the government had not even decided on a design for the war memorial. There were many notable citizens in the Wellington War Memorial Carillon Society. You can see the whole society here. In the green circle is Mrs. E. Moore, formerly Gladys Watkins. I'll tell you more about her later. In the blue is Frederick de Jersey Clare, notable church architect. In the red is Sir Harold Beauchamp, who is Catherine Mansfield's father. He was a successful business person, and in 1923 he gave £6,000 to purchase pictures for the National Art Gallery. He gave a further £5,000 for the establishment of the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum. In 1928, the government concluded that the National War Memorial should consist of two structures: a carillon, in which the bronze bells, which had been gifted by the Wellington Carillon Society, would be housed, and a hall of memories. The carillon was to be played on anniversaries of significant military events, and concerts would be broadcast over the new medium of radio. A new National Museum and Art Gallery was to be constructed at the rear of the memorial. A competition was held in 1929 for the plans for the War Memorial and the Dominion Museum. The competition was won by Gummer and Ford, who are notable New Zealand architects. On the right-hand photo, that's C. Reginald Ford in the middle. It's thought that he joined the Royal Navy straight from school and then served on several Navy vessels. He volunteered to serve on the first of the Royal Geographic Society's National Antarctica exhibitions, led by Commander Robert Falcon Scott in the Discovery in 1901. He served as a steward and an assistant to Scott. Ford emigrated to New Zealand and trained as an architect after that in 1906, going on to become president of the New Zealand Institute of Architects, a fellow of the Geographic Society, and president of the Auckland Society of the Arts. William Gummer is on the right, and I always think he looks particularly stylish in this image. Along with his friends William Gray Young and Cecil Wood, Gummer was one of New Zealand's finest architects of his generation. He is described as a tireless perfectionist who would rework designs long after others might have considered them complete, and a polished draftsman. He was utterly dedicated to his profession. The partnership between Gummer and Ford began in 1923, and they had a long and productive association until 1961, when both retired. They had complementary skills and personalities, with Ford managing the practice and dealing with the clients and designing, This beautiful watercolour is a part of their entry to the competition, and you'll see what I mean by the beautiful drafting and colouring down here. You'll notice that the scheme has a large square in front with a wide avenue leading down to the right. That actually went right down to the waterfront. It's a powerful axis reminiscent of grand avenues and views in planned cities such as Canberra. In Wellington, this road was never realised. To be fair, it was probably well outside the competition brief. Carillon Tower opened in 1932, the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum in 1936, but construction of the Hall of Memories at the base of the Campanile Tower was delayed by the Depression and then by the Second World War. The Hall of Memories was officially opened by the Governor-General Sir Bernard Ferguson in 1964. This is another drawing from the design competition. I think it's a gorgeous drawing that's technically incredible, but the addition of the watercolour and the detail make it a crossover into an art piece. The War Memorial and the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum behind form a highly symmetrical and balanced composition, and the landscape is also integrated with the design. If there was one thing I could say to Gummer and Ford at this point, it would be about those very small trees they're showing next to the stairs. They're going to get really, really big and start to knock the stairs over, so I would suggest that they move them a little bit further away. This image is pretty similar to what was built, but there are a few differences. The bottom of the tower is very similar. However, the cyan arrow shows the base shading towards darker in the drawing. It was built in a single colour of stone. I don't know if the shading was a design strategy that wasn't realised, or if it was simply a graphic technique used in the drawing. There are more differences in the upper part of the tower. The red arrows show 5 vertical panels, whereas the existing has 3. The green arrow shows louvers in the vertical panels, while the existing has a lattice pattern of precast concrete. There are blank panels at level 6, where the yellow arrows are, whereas what was built has a small balcony there. And lastly, there are no copper discs at the top, as it's shown by the pink arrow. Construction work started on the tower in 1931. It was to be built first, with the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum to follow. The left-hand images show a truck removing earth from the site. Ironically, the text above the cab says, "Build in brick." They didn't, the Carillon is reinforced concrete. The image on the right is early Buckle Street, pink dashed line, with the Carillon site to the right with the red arrow. Note the large gun in the centre where that purple arrow is pointing. This is a remnant of the Army's use of the site, and it is an Armstrong gun, one of those which were brought to New Zealand in the 1880s during the Russian scare. They were used to fortify New Zealand's coast against a feared Russian invasion. The gun is believed to have been buried during the Carillon construction work and has never been found. Every time we dig, we keep an eye open. There are some marvellous images of the Carillon Tower under construction. Starting at the top and going left to right, this image, top right, shows men working on the western approach to the Carillon in the Dominion Museum. When you have a close look at it, there's quite a bit of the traditional leaning on a shovel happening in the background. The second image shows Prime Minister Sir George Forbes laying the foundation stone on the 15th of May 1931. To his right, a local MP and later Prime Minister Peter Fraser, and the architect William Gummer. The inscription on the stone reads, "Reo Wairua, to the glory of God, to the memory of the New Zealanders that died in the Great War, 1914 to 1918, and in honour of those that served or suffered." Bottom left is the Carillon under construction, a lot of timber shuttering to contain the structural concrete. Number 4 is a wider view of the tower under construction. There's a shed up on the flat where the blue arrow is talking. That was the stonemason's workshop And the last image is actually in that stonemason's workshop, and there are the masons working on stones for the tower. The tower hasn't been scaffolded all that often. From what we can work out, it was scaffolded when it was built in the 1930s, in about 1980 when it was replastered, in 2012 when it was replastered, and now for the structural strengthening. So it's pretty rare to be able to perch on the top, as these gentlemen are during the 1930 works, with any degree of safety. Here are two rare images that were taken when the tower was complete, but construction had not started on the National Art Gallery and Dominion Museum beyond. This dates the images to 1932. It was quite a short period of time when there was nothing behind the Carillon. The tower is the visually dominant element on the site, rising 52 metres above the forecourt, which is in turn nearly 7 metres above the parade ground at Pukeahu Park. The design of the tower is described as an elegantly proportioned symmetrical pylon, designed in an idiom that cleverly mixes Art Deco, Spanish Mission, and stripped classical ideas and motifs in an architecturally complete whole. On Anzac Day 1932, huge crowds attended the dedication of the new National War Memorial to those who died in the Great War. Since then, the National War Memorial has continued to be a focus for ceremonies, visiting dignitaries, and the New Zealand public. After the Second World War, a Hall of Memories was added to the rear of the Carillon as a memorial to those who had died in all New Zealand's overseas wars. In 2004, the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior was added. In 2015, the Pukeahu National War Memorial Park was opened at the site, once again gathering a huge crowd to mark the latest development. So now to move from talking about the tower to talking about the instrument. I'm going to give some background information about carillons before moving on to our carillon in particular. A carillon is an instrument composed of bells. Carillons can be in towers, known as campaniles, or at ground level. Our carillon happens to be in a tower. My pronunciation of carillon is probably different to what you're used to. Our national carillonist is American, and that's how I've grown used to hearing it and saying it. If you would like to try it other ways, in French it is le carillon. In UK English, Carillon. Take your pick. For context, carillons are found on all 6 of the inhabited continents, and there's around 700 carillons worldwide. Netherlands, Belgium, and the US have about 2/3 of those. There are 3 carillons in Australia and 1 in New Zealand. I mentioned previously that the Wellington War Memorial Carillon Society procured the bells prior to the decision to build a national carillon. This is the article or advertisement in the Evening Post, Saturday, May 15th, 1926, in which the Carillon Society set out their idea and asked for support. The response was tremendous, and the 49 bells available were oversubscribed. The bells were ordered, cast, and late in 1929, a temporary structure was built in Hyde Park to house the Carillon bells, which is seen in the right-hand image there, and it stood there until the 1930s. Gladys Watkins, if you remember her from earlier, was among those who actually played concerts on the bells for the public when it was in Hyde Park. In the front of that image, Governor General Lord Bledisloe and Lady Bledisloe, and Sir Thomas Wilford and Lady Wilford, his wife. He was the MP for Wellington for 30 odd years at that time. The bells were cast by Gillett and Johnson in England. This is a photo published in the Evening Post on the 30th of January 1931. They will be kept there until the time comes for them to be placed in the Memorial Tower on Mount Cook. The smaller bells are contained in the cases shown in the photograph. This is a list of the initial 49 bells, which comprise 4 octaves of notes. Each bell is named and has an inscription. The names of battles, such as Passchendaele, Walker's Ridge, the Somme, and are generally dedicated to individuals who died at that place. Some bells are dedicated to groups, such as the medical services, the merchant marine, the nurses, and the Anzacs. The smallest bell is called Delville Wood. It's around 200 millimeters in diameter and it weighs 4 kg. It's a G sharp. The largest bell is Reo Wairua, which is 2 meters in diameter, weighs 5 tons, and is dedicated to the 1,700 men of Wellington and suburbs who gave their lives in the Great War. An additional 25 bells have been added over time. Some of these have been personally added by the National Carillonist, but 4 new base bells were ordered for the National War Memorial Carillon to mark the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in 1995. The largest is the Peace Bell, Rangi Marire Bell, which is 2.7 meters in diameter and weighs 12 tons. It was cast in the world's largest ship propeller foundry in the Netherlands by the famous Whitechapel Bell Foundry of London. It's the largest Carillon bell just been cast anywhere in the world since 1934. The installation of these 4 bells provided new notes for the instrument and finally completed the Carillon at 74 bells, making it the 3rd largest Carillon by weight in the world. And it's over 70 tons of bells. So how does the Carillon actually work? This image shows the bells in the lowest level of the upper belfry of our Carillon. The blue arrows show the clappers, the orange arrows the wires that connect them to the clavier keyboard, and the red arrows are obviously the bells. The bells are stationary. Activating a key in the clavier keyboard pulls the wire, which moves the clapper, which hits the bell and makes the sound. Now, who plays the Carillon? On the right are the 3 past Carillonists and our current national Carillonist. Miss Gladys Watkins, as well as being a member of the Wellington Memorial Carillon Society, set herself to studying the art of carillon playing in Belgium and became our first Carillonist. The current national Carillonist is Timothy Hurd, who has held the post since 1984. He's also active worldwide as a carillon architect, consultant, composer, and musicologist. Tim is extremely hands-on and has rebuilt this instrument several times, which is a demanding and precise engineering task. The image shows Tim sitting at the keyboard of the Carillon and using his fists to play the keys. He's also using his feet on a larger set of similar pedals below. On the left is a view of the back of the keyboard, and you can see the bell wires coming down from the upper belfry and up from the lower belfry. These are the floor plans of the tower. So starting at the bottom, the images shaded with red are the 3-level high public living lobby at the ground floor of the Carillon. From there are steps up to the Hall of Memories. And as you go into the hall, you cross the seismic joint that allows the tower and the hall to move separately. There's a stair to the right in those red images. The orange level is the lift entry level. So 3 flights of stairs to get up to the lift entry. And then the lift only goes up to the clavier level. It doesn't go to the top of the tower. But this is still easier than it was in Gladys Watkins' day. There was no lift at all when the Carillon was built, and access was by ladders and steps. Level 4 in yellow is the workshop level where Tim works on the Carillon components. The next levels are the business area of the actual instrument. The 3 plans in green show the lower belfry. It's essentially a triple height space that contains a freestanding bell frame that supports the largest bells. The blue plan is the clavier room. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. The indigo plans are the upper belfry, which again is a triple height space with a freestanding bell frame. This bell frame contains the medium bells at the bottom and progresses up to the smallest bells at the top. The violet plans are the crow's nest and the roof. So here's the cross section to show you those. So we have the entry from the green arrow from the forecourt. It's a double height lobby in the red, and the Hall of Memories through beyond that. The lower belfry in the green, the clavier chamber, and the upper belfry. So the keyboard that actually plays the clavier is located in the clavier chamber, so the blue office. So we have bells above feeding down to the clavier, and the bells below, the controls feed up to the clavier room. So it's time to talk about the current work to strengthen the tower. The structural engineers for this work are Holmes Consulting Group, and Panos is here. Is Julia not here? Oh, yes. Oh, yep. Hi. Panos and Julia are both here representing Holmes and supporting MCH and myself, so thank you for coming. I'm an architect. I'm not a structural engineer, so my descriptions are going to be simple. And Panos and Julia will take any hard questions. So here goes. The tower is constructed of reinforced concrete. It has thick walls, it's a regular shape, and it's pretty strong. The lower portion of the tower has only small windows in a lot of concrete structure. But where the belfries are, there are large openings in the structure to let the sound out. This means there's less structure, less connection between the structural elements, which means the upper part of the tower can move more in an earthquake. And this is the part that needs to be strengthened. The structural strengthening design has three components. The first of these is some additional steel structure. The new steel frame is shown on the right, and these are Holmes's drawings. The design adds 8 steel columns which get tied to the concrete on the inside of the tower. There's 2 on each face of the tower, and at the top of each pair of columns there's a viscous damper. So the orange arrows on the right-hand drawing show 1 pair of vertical columns. The corresponding orange dashed lines on the drawing show where those columns would actually go. Likewise, the green arrow at the top shows the viscous damper, and the green line at the top of the tower shows where that viscous damper goes. So all that happens inside the tower and will hardly be visible from the outside. A viscous damper is a high piece of technology. It works like a shock absorber, absorbs the movement in the columns, and this keeps the earthquake energy out of the concrete structure. These photos are of the dampers at the St. James and Courtney Place. So the diagonal member is the main working piece, but note there's a hefty steel frame right around it, which is working part of it as well. So the dampers are made to very exact specifications. They come from the USA with a lead time of many months. I believe they're actually being manufactured now. Well,
shop drawings are online.
Shop drawings? Okay, so we're not even up to manufacturing yet. So then they get manufactured and then posted. Yeah, that'd be good. Then they will get shipped to Wellington. So the main construction challenge in the frame is getting the new steel into the tower and into location. The design deliberately uses small pieces of steel that can fit through small holes in the floors and then be moved around the tower by person power. The strategy is to construct a narrow shaft up the tower and to use a winch to pull steel sections up and then use pulleys or people to move them into position. The right-hand photo shows one of these shafts being constructed, so the dashed line there is indicating where these pieces of steel would actually be winched vertically through the tower. Brent, who's Maycroft Construction site manager, has made up full-size models of the largest pieces of steel and ply, and in the right-hand image there, he is demonstrating how a complicated section can be winched through a tight opening in the floor. The second move is to allow the tower to rock a little in an earthquake. 100 mil separation is being formed between the base of the tower and the concrete that support the exterior stairs. This gets filled in with compressible material and then it gets tiled over, so you won't even see that as there. Third move is some additional bracing to the bell frames. So these are the original bell frames that were made in England and sent over. This image here is the lower bell frame, which has the 6 largest bells. The pink members are the existing steel, and the dark red are the new members that need to be added for a little bit of extra bracing and stability. Here's a bit about the program. Other maintenance work that is being done at the same time as the strengthening includes some plaster repairs, copper roof repairs, concrete repairs, window repairs, and installation of handrails at the entry. I'd like to acknowledge all these firms and the people involved in the current work. It is a skilled and dedicated team. The image is from a philatelic competition essay for a 4-penny pictorial stamp from 1931, and it was designed by Richard Tripe and William Cooch, both of Wellington. I'm going to end with this image of the first Anzac Day celebrated at the Carillon. At the dedication ceremony, the Governor-General, Lord Bledisloe, expressed his hope that the music played from the Carillon would serve to connect those listening with their history and the country through the playing of traditional folk music and national songs. That evening, Carillonist Clifford Ball and Wellingtonian Gladdy Watkins gave this first recital from the Carillon. The Evening Post reported that last night the air was filled with music for one entrancing hour. Thousands of people stood as if spellbound, listening to the music flowing out from the louvers in the tall tower and flooding the city with melody and harmony of indescribable beauty. It must have been an emotional day for everybody, and I'd like to think that those involved in the design and the construction of the tower and the Carillon were there, and we're proud of their contribution to this memorial. The current team working on the building certainly feel pride, responsibility, and a connection with this building. It's not just another commercial project, and it's one that we will all remember. We look forward to Anzac Day 2026 and to many Anzac Days beyond that. Thank you for your attention.